Coming up on today's show.
I was asked so many times for, a lot of people know it when they see it, and they are not necessarily as interested in the clinical definition of hoarding. So, they talk to therapists and they know that there's the points that somebody with hoarding tendencies are experiencing. But really, a lot more people wanted to know what it's really like behind the scenes to work with people with a hoarding disorder.
Of course, what they want is they want there to be an explosive argument where, the person storms out because you're asking them to, get real and get rid of this stuff, and that's not really the way it goes, is it?
None of the things that you see on TV are manufactured. Everything really happens, and there are just really complicated family dynamics going on while we're filming. And remember, a lot of these people haven't been brought in together for years.
From hoarding to hope, today on Keeping You Organized. Hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today we have one of our most favorite people in the world joining us back, Geraldine Thomas. How are you doing today? Metropolitan Organizing, Metro Zing, as everybody knows you by, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm doing great, John. Thank you for asking. I hope you are.
Well, we have a couple great things that I'm doing phenomenal, by the way, but we have some great things that are happening. Any day now, maybe even today or tomorrow, you've got a brand new book coming out on decluttering, which our audience is going to love. But we are recording this particular episode with a book you just got done publishing just a couple months ago. And I happen to have one of the fresh copies right here in my hand, From Hoarding to Hope, Understanding People Who Hoard and How to Help Them. Now, you're kind of an expert on this, right? Because you were involved in the show The Hoarders. Is that correct?
That's right. A&E show Hoarders. I've been filming with them since 2009. So traveled all over the country and seen all kinds of collections and big piles of stuff.
Yeah. So that's, I would say you'd have a big scrapbook, but maybe you don't have a big scrapbook because you're trying to declutter. So anyway.
No scrapbook here.
Well, let's talk about this book because I want to know, you've been around hoarders a lot and you have a ton of experience with hoarders. Why did you actually write the book in the first place?
I was asked so many times for, a lot of people know it when they see it, and they are not necessarily as interested in the clinical definition of hoarding. So, they talk to therapists and they know that there's the points that somebody with hoarding tendencies are experiencing. But really, a lot more people wanted to know what it's really like behind the scenes to work with people with a hoarding disorder, and what it's like to live with somebody with that disorder. And for me personally, I think people with hoarding tendencies and hoarding disorders are just completely misunderstood. And, TV sometimes focuses on the most extreme cases, but that's not really what most organizers are dealing with day to day. Most organizers are going into levels 1, 2, and 3 homes with hoarding.
Yeah, I think about the whole reality show. And of course, what they want is they want there to be an explosive argument where, the person storms out because you're asking them to, get real and get rid of this stuff. And that's not really the way it goes, is it?
Not necessarily. None of the things that you see on TV are manufactured. Everything really happens, and there are just really complicated family dynamics going on while we're filming. And remember, a lot of these people haven't been brought in together for years, and there's tons and tons of disagreements about, you're choosing your whatever collection over me, and I'm your husband, wife, fill in the blank, child. So there's a lot of tender emotions and feelings. And but for the most part, from my perspective, the people I work with off camera, as well as the people I've worked with on camera, yeah, they kind of, edit to show like the intense moments, but they're really phenomenal people. And many of them are extremely high functioning, very intelligent, lovable people with a great sense of humor.
Okay, so let's take a high-level view at the book. Kind of how is it organized, and what are some of the things that people can expect when they read your book?
Okay, so I think the feedback I've had from all of my first readers and pre-readers and first purchasers of the book has been very positive. I think I have a warm voice towards people with this disorder. In the book, I also have interviewed some people who don't want to be called hoarders. They don't like that name, and I can understand why. It's not exactly a great sounding name, right?
Right.
And none of us want to be identified by one little tidbit. Like, I don't want to be known as, the gallbladder person who had gallbladder surgery or whatever. So we shouldn't do that anyway, but for some reason that's kind of latched on. So there's interviews with people with the disorder. There's an interview with someone who's married to somebody with the disorder. There's an interview with Jessie Scholl, who grew up in the home. Her mother is a hoarder and she's an author. Then there are interviews with doctors, therapists. So Dr. Michael Tompkins, Dr. Susan Orenstein, and Dr. Marla Diebler. And they're spread out throughout the country intentionally. I wanted different viewpoints from different experts.
So you're telling me that there are doctors who really have looked into this. What kinds of things are they saying? I know we don't want to get into the clinical definition, but what are some of the common threads that, even though these guys are spread out, that they're coming to agreement on about hoarding?
So the therapists have agreed that hoarding definitely almost always piggybacks off some other mental health disorder, whether it's depression or OCD or ADHD. There's almost always something other in the mix. And as organizers, what we're finding is that oftentimes clients are seeing therapists for years and years, and the therapists are completely unaware that there's a hoarding disorder going on in the house. And of course, we're not allowed to diagnose, but we see things, and we're in, 5-foot tall piles of clutter. We're pretty sure it's hoarding. Again, not an official diagnosis, but so from my end and from people that I've collaborated with, we're trying to get that person to recognize you should share this with your therapist. And if they don't specialize in hoarding, you can perhaps be put in touch with somebody that does.
All right, let's put that into a real life example. You don't have to give a name, obviously, but of someone you have talked to where that situation was what it was, and you got them hooked up with the therapist talking about these things and how it ended up resolving.
It's still a work in progress for many of them. It's not a quick fix, unfortunately. I think it's kind of like any other problem that people struggle with mental health. There's not a guaranteed 13 sessions from now and you'll be cured, or 2 years from now and you'll feel a lot better. It's very much an individual thing. There are varying degrees. So everybody, there's a spectrum, just like maybe an eating disorder or ADHD. Some people are going to be far right, some people are going to be left. And it depends what else is going on with that particular client that we're engaged with, and, how their finances are. There's so many variables, but for many of the people I'm working with, being able to identify why they have these urges to acquire massive amounts of stuff and why they're unable to discard things and how it's affecting their everyday life, to be able to share that not only with an organizer, but with somebody that's treating them for other mental health disorders has been huge.
What are some of those one-liners? I mean, that they're saying, the reason I do this is?
Well, again, it's very individual. So some people think the reason they're doing that is because I didn't have much as a child. I was really deprived. My parents were, whatever. They didn't let me collect, or my parents were really strict. That's something I hear a lot. Or in the case of several of my clients, there's been some traumatic emotional or physical event that has, and again, these are my words, it's not a clinical definition, but maybe taken away their innocence and made them feel vulnerable in some way, emotionally or physically. And then other people think it's just because they're super frugal, like, I want to save the planet, I don't want to put stuff in a landfill. Other people are super creative types. So I'm going to save that because I know eventually I'm going to need 300 empty prescription bottles for a craft I'm going to do. There's just I mean, I could, the reasons go on and on, John.
Yeah, it's interesting. The generation that grew up during the Depression really is not many of them are around anymore. So using that, well, I grew up in the Depression, we didn't have anything, we held on to everything we could. That excuse maybe can't be used anymore, or reason. I shouldn't say it's an excuse. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, I want to talk about how a hoarder works with an organizer. Okay. And if a hoarder can do some self-diagnosis and help themselves. So we'll do that. We're with Geraldine Thomas, Metro Zing, and talking about From Hoarding to Hope. And we'll be right back. When you've got it together, everyone can tell. Your confidence is obvious. Introducing Viewables.com from Smead. Use the Viewables labeling system to transform your drawer of hanging files into a tidy, organized filing system. Using the premium hanging folder tabs, see the label from the front, top, and back. It's easy. Access Viewables.com from any computer, tablet, or internet-enabled smartphone. Let's make some labels. It's free, and there's nothing to download or install. Choose the label type and format your label just the way you want. You can even add index characters or icons for distinctive filing. Set up a free Viewables cloud account, and your secure login lets you save your projects for convenient access from any computer. And with Viewables multi-purpose labels, you can use one label for any type of file, including hanging folders, top tab folders, super tab folders, or oversized items like notebooks and file boxes. Upload a list of file headings and print your complete set of labels in moments. There's even a library of templates for commonly used label sets. It's never been easier to set up neat-looking files that have easy-to-read headings and efficient color codes. Obviously organized. Viewables.com. From Smead, keeping you organized. We are back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about Geraldine Thomas's new book. Actually, not the newest book, because the new book's coming out either in the next few days, but her book recently written. You've just been on a writing spree, haven't you, lately, Geraldine?
Yeah. Yes, I have. I need to get up and exercise.
Well, anyway, it's called From Hoarding to Hope, and it's subtitled Understanding People Who Hoard and How to Help Them. And let's talk about that, how to help them, because sometimes people, when they get disorganized, are just hopeless anyway, right? So whether they're a hoarder or not, but I would imagine...
No one's ever hopeless, John.
Yeah.
Let's not
I'm thinking a hoarder is probably even more. So, so how does first of all, before we talk about how a hoarder works with a professional organizer, how about, can a hoarder self-diagnose and help themselves out of that situation? Have you seen that happen? Tell me, is it possible?
Okay. So let's back up a few minutes. Let's back up a few steps. So the first thing I want to educate people on is we probably should try to get away from calling people with a mental health disorder by the disorder, right? So we could say people with hoarding tendencies, people with hoarding disorders, instead of, like I referred a few minutes ago to we don't want to be known as the gallbladders. So I don't know so much about self-diagnosis. I have to say probably most people who reach out, at least to me in my office, have watched the show and will call and have sort of self-diagnosed themselves. So it is kind of interesting. And many of them start the conversation by saying, hi, I saw you on TV, or I saw, Matt or Standalin or Dorothy or whoever they're watching. And I think that I'm a lot like the person that was featured last night because, and then they'll list some reasons, and then they'll say, I'm not as bad as, and then they'll have another client that they've watched on TV. So in that sense, it's been really helpful, because immediately then I think, okay, I've got an idea, like this person, is moving about their house with a little bit more ease, or maybe it's not. They're hopelessly feeling locked in. And then as far as helping themselves, I think there's been just this long history of trying to help themselves. They don't want to be like this. This is not fun for people. I think anybody with any type of mental health disorder will tell you it's not an enjoyable way to live life. Nobody chooses this. So they try to help themselves, and often they can't, and they end up isolating themselves.
Right. So let's say now they get out of isolation, they come to you. Do you have kind of a standard procedure you diagnose and walk people through as far as getting, going through the first few steps of this? Or how do you approach someone who has these tendencies?
Well, the first thing I do is I spend a lot of time on the phone with them or the family member, whoever's calling, and I make it perfectly clear that I am not qualified to diagnose anybody with anything, including myself. So that's step one. I tell them that only a licensed professional could diagnose them correctly. And I'll give them, some of the typical things that I see in people with hoarding disorders homes. And then I insist that they'd be willing to work with a therapist. Because again, I cannot cure, no organizer in the world that I'm aware of can cure hoarding or even approach the mental health aspects of it. So the organizer comes in really to deal with the physical clutter. Now, in a perfect, world, the organizer, the client, and the therapist collaborate and form a nice little plan and then make progress.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, and you want to make sure that people know that you don't diagnose and treat that. Right. So let's get into the physical stuff. So let's see okay, we're on the same page here. What might be one of the first 2 or 3 things that that you put them through? I mean,
so one of the first things is if they can upload pictures and send them to me, a couple of just how they're living. We can talk on the phone a little bit about the stuff that I'm seeing. Then we ask if I'd be allowed in their house, and then we set up the first appointment if they're agreeable to that. And I walk in and I tell them, oftentimes, if there's fleas or bed bugs or something like that, I will be wearing protective clothes. I don't want to offend you, but it's for my own safety, and you just have to, this is just the normal way that I do business. So boots, a white suit, gloves, a mask, whatever's necessary. And again, most of the people who reach out for help are not at that level. So then we go room by room. We spend a little time talking about things. The first appointment or two, and the first appointment is usually 3 to 4 hours, is very gentle. It's more talking, it's more gathering information, it's more just trying to move stuff around and gauge their comfort level. Now that is all dependent on the fact that these are people that are functioning well and living, and nobody's knocking on their door threatening to take away their kids or their home or their property or whatever else. That's a completely different set of rules when a landlord or a lawyer contacts me, or social services. So then I usually bring in a hula hoop, an embroidery hoop, something, and we place it on one flat surface, and we just try going item by item, very slowly, very gently, and saying, do you think you can let go of this? Can we put it away? When's the last time you used it? What made you buy it? And then we just kind of slowly start that way.
Now, do you find a lot of opposition, or at this point, is there good cooperation? Or maybe another way to ask that question, like how, on a percentage of stuff, how much stuff are they letting go on that first go round?
That's actually one of my very first questions when I walk in with somebody. That first visit, I will say, looking around, how much of the stuff in here, if you were able to let go, how much of this would you be willing to let go? And, depending, I know this is very unscientific, unprofessional, but a lot of times people will say, I think 75% of it should go. And that's a great sign to me. Now, once we dig in and start working, it gets a little more challenging. But when people say, I don't think much of it should go, then I kind of say, okay, this is going to be a little longer. And if after 3 or 4 visits, so about 12 hours into it, if nothing is going, I usually just tell them they may not be ready and move on. Mm-hmm. I don't want them to keep spending their money and their time. And I think it's kind of deflating for them to keep working and not making progress.
Has that happened, and have they re-engaged, or have they changed on the spot?
No, people usually don't change on the spot. Sometimes, again, this is rare, but every once in a while, I feel like sometimes people reach out because they're lonely and they enjoy the company there and they'd like somebody to help them. But 12 hours into it, if nothing is going, I'm not doing my job and not being effective. So I will tell them, give it a little more time, or work with a therapist, or practice, putting stuff in bags and decluttering it yourself. But I have had multiple people call me back after 1 or 2 years and say, I do think I'm ready now, come back. And they are ready.
Right. Earlier in the show, you talked about the situation of talking to someone who was a hoarder who was married to an organizer. How did that dynamic work out?
It's really difficult. It's a very, very challenging relationship. So it was a husband who's featured in the book. His name is Isaac, and the people's names in the books have been changed. Isaac's married to a woman, and he's just at his wit's end as to what to do. And he sees this in her other family members. So, he reached out to me initially after watching the show and just wanted to know what were the next steps. But he was kind enough to let me interview him and put his answers in the book, like what it's like to live day to day with this person. So his wife is one of these examples. Very high functioning on the outside. She holds down a job, but can't let go of stuff and just has this deep urge to keep acquiring.
So just so I got that straight, that person was not an organizer, the spouse, or?
No.
So they brought you in to do that, and you had agreement from the one who kind of wanted to bring you in.
No, this is just somebody that I met online.
Okay, great. All right. Well, listen, we're almost at...
reached out.
We're almost out of time here. I want to promote the book one more time, From Hoarding to Hope, Understanding People Who Hoard and How to Help Them. Geraldine, where can they get this book, first of all?
That's available on Amazon. If you put in Geraldine Thomas, because I don't have tons of books out there, it should come up pretty quickly. From Hoarding to Hope.
Great.
My name.
And do you have can we release the title of the new book that's just going to be out now?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is 200 tips, tactics, and techniques for decluttering your home.
Awesome. So that would be for a different level of person of, it's not a hoarding book, but it's someone that can, use it at home. And I think that's going to be a great thing. How about your organizing services? With all this writing, do you still have time to do a little business for people?
I absolutely do. Yeah. And that kind of recharges me, actually, John. I love getting in there and reconnecting with my clients. So it's been great. And of course, I have independent contractors who help me out a lot when I can't take new clients calling. But yeah, business is good.
Okay. And how do people get a hold of you? They want to talk to you.
And they can call my office through Metropolitan Organizing, or just visit me on my website, or socialize with me on social media.
Yes, and you are a social butterfly. You're all over. Metro Zing, that's all you have to remember. So, right. Geraldine, thank you for helping us get season 3 of Keeping You Organized kicked off here. It's been great. I encourage people to go to smead.com/podcast to look at your past episodes. We have a lot of great things that we've done with you, and more to come, because now we're going to have you back on to talk about the new book as well. So,
I can't wait.
Great.
Thank
you. Well, there you have it. From Hoarding to Hope, Geraldine Thomas. Get your copy, folks, and we'll see you next time on Keeping You Organized. Coming up next time on Keeping You Organized.
So it's all about finding the right fit. And what I've done is put together a bunch of things, questions that you can think about to help you determine to find that right one. So number 1 is the assessment. And in that assessment, basically that phase, you want to clarify what your needs are. This is really important.